All right. It is my honor and privilege to introduce our keynote speaker. He is a 29-year brain cancer survivor and provocateur hailed for leading a social movement for young adults with cancer. He founded the award-winning nonprofit organization Stupid Cancer, the world's largest AYA cancer community dedicated for empowering young people with support and connection. He hosted the first healthcare talk radio show, The Stupid Cancer Show. He later produced the award-winning documentary, The Cancer Mavericks, A History of Survivorship, and the top 10 award-winning healthcare podcast, Out of Patience. He is dubbed the Podfather of healthcare and is considered one of the country's most influential talents and visionary voices for the AYA community. When he's not rallying for patients, he can also be found performing as a concert pianist and public speaker. Please help me give a warm welcome to our keynote speaker, Matthew Zachary.
Hello. Can we lower the lights a bit? I don't know if that's possible. The house lights, maybe? So, advocacy can mean very different things to very different people. And the perspective of history can mean very different things to very different people. And I'm here to talk to you about both, with the terrible privilege of being alive 28 years later, 29 years this December, and the privilege of being 1 year younger than ABTA, started in 1973, and with the privilege of being a Gen Xer who misses the 80s. So I started in this life like anyone else, born and raised in Brooklyn. I found out one day that my mom played piano as a little girl. My grandmother threw the piano away during her honeymoon. And it took 20 years for there to be a piano appearing in our house that I started playing at the age of 11. I asked my mom, where do you put your fingers? And she said, and I said, and I had lessons the next day. And it became something that gave me stability, an anchor, purpose, and to make the girls like when I played Sticks from Sam Goody. College, went to Binghamton University for music with a minor in computer science because I was soldering motherboards in my basement because my dad was a great father when I was 8 years old. So I found this photo of my dorm room because I'm going to do a callback to floppy disks a little later in the presentation. But all hail the 1990s technology, because this is where I found what I will reveal shortly. My plan was to go to grad school because I became a composer along the way. I was writing for film, campus television, orchestras, symphonies, and it's amazing to have a sense of who you want to be with such assuredness at such a young age. But man plans and God laughs. So during the summer of '95, I was interning at the World Trade Center, and I started to feel strange tingling in my left hand. We were discussing why does it take so long to figure things out. And I just figured the elevators were just so fast. It was some kind of like, I don't know. And I was 21, invincible, when you're supposed to be invincible. But I got back to school and I couldn't write on my left hand. I couldn't hold a pen. It just wouldn't, like, what's wrong with me? And it got weirder because I owned that laptop. That was a hard image to find, by the way. And I couldn't type with my left hand. And of course, I'm a musician, so I couldn't arpeggiate with my left hand. So I just stupidly switched my hands and said, all right, this will do. You know that dog on fire gif, like this is fine? That was how I felt back then. So I went to the campus doctors. I mean, all love to practitioners, but this was a state school in the 1990s in upstate New York. Can anyone guess what I was prescribed for my symptoms? Shout it out. You're all right. Robitussin. Now, if there were blogs in the 90s, mine would have been called Robitussin for brain cancer. So shortly afterwards, these real symptoms started to happen. And they're like, oh, maybe something actually is wrong with Matt. We should stop telling him it's all in his head and tell him it's all in his head. So I went home the fall semester of my senior year, got an MRI, and again, 90s reference does not apply today. With my mom, went to the diner after the scans. We got home, and the answering machine was blinking. I was told I had brain cancer on an answering machine. How's that for empathy? So here's what it was. Medulloblastoma, smack dab in my cerebellum, which explained everything. And I was so happy that I wasn't crazy and that there was actually something wrong with me. But then, of course, they got to cut you open and take it out, and God knows what's going to happen next. So January 10th was my craniotomy. January 9th was the storm of the century in New York City. So 30,000 feet of snow descended upon my hometown. And God knows my dad thankfully had a Jeep. At that very time, we happened to own a Jeep. And we trudged behind the snow plows to get to the hospital. True story. So I found this photo. This is what I looked like a week after leaving the hospital and gaining 85 pounds on Decadron. That was fun on a bun. But there's more. I knew that was going to happen. Because we're going to give you radiation. Like, what the hell's radiation? Oh, we're going to stick you in an oven. Remember Chernobyl? That's you. True story. But you look great. Bald. These are my two roommates, two of my best friends to date. And, but this is the reality that I was facing. What the hell do I do? It's out of my head. I'm dying. Like the radiation killed me, but I didn't die. I think that's how I described it back then. But of course, I was going to grad school. So the worst day of my life at that time was calling USC and withdrawing my application. Because there's no way I would be able to regain the 11 years I lost that this tumor caused me. My hand worked after surgery, but all that muscle memory was gone. So I did manage to graduate. Binghamton did the right thing, good PR, don't let the cancer kid not graduate. So kudos for them letting me actually fill my course curriculum for the fall and kind of coast through with a really, really weird version of the oncosenioritis. So, but if there's one relevant story that's a through thread to everything we're talking about today, it's this story. And in the jargon world of pharma, they lop this under one stupid umbrella called access, which is basically knowing shit exists that you never knew you needed to know about. And in my case, it was about chemotherapy which in context of the 90s take this into consideration. My father has a best friend who he met on the steps of Hebrew School in 1953. Dr. J. Tishfield is a triple PhD from Yale who started the University of Indiana Bloomington and basically invented the entire platform for chemotherapy. We didn't know that. How would I know that? He's just Uncle Jay. So we went back to the doctors after radiation, and I said, well, when am I dying? What do you got for me? And they said, we're going to give you a 50% chance to live for 5 years. And we were just stunned. I just turned 20. I'm 22. I'm going to die 27? But they said, but wait. Like, there's more, infomercial, right? Or one last thing, like the Steve Jobs. And we want to give you chemotherapy, and we think it'll increase your odds of survival. Like, I'm up for anything. 55% over 5 years if we do the chemotherapy. Or you could get lucky. They didn't say I could get lucky without it. But my Uncle Jay stepped in, back at a time where no one gave you their data. But this man pulled every card he had internationally and got Sloan Kettering to tell him the chemo protocol. And I'll say lots of syllabic words that you understand: cyclophosphamide, vincristine, carboplatin, cisplatin, all these fancy, crappy things that you don't want in your body. And he found out that the cocktail was excessively high in cisplatin and vincristine. Unbeknownst to us, how could we possibly know this? One of the side effects of vincristine is neuropathy in your fingers and toes. What was my profession again? And cisplatin has all sorts of crazy hearing damage. What was my profession again? So can you imagine a 47-year-old man talking to his 22-year-old godson and telling him that you would rather take the risk of dying in 5 years, knowing that you have the possibility of regenerating your faculties as a musician and own that. Or you could choose this path and risk living to 80 and never being a musician again. How do you make that choice? I did, but my point of this story is that I wasn't made aware of my choices. I wasn't considered a human being through this practice. And only by the grace of God that I had Jay Tishfield as my godfather, this was my reaction. And they got up. These are like the heads of pediatric neuro-onc and radiation onc at Sloan Kettering in 1996. Having this kid tell them GFU, and they stood up like an SVU and they slammed their hands on the table and they said, "We're trying to save your life." And this was my reaction. Bye-bye. And that was 28 and a half years ago. And I got lucky because I had access by accident. And that's not okay. And 28 years later, it's still not okay. So Plan B became Plan A. Now, I wasn't soldering motherboards, I promise you. But cancer is the gift that keeps on giving, as long as you're living. What do I do as a shell of a human at 22? Impotent, infertile, skin burns, cognitive deficits, stress, anxiety, scanxiety, fear of mortality. My friends all went to grad school, or they thought I was radioactive and left me for good. But my father, who's still with us, by the way. He's 78, golfing in Myrtle Beach right now. Literally said, if you're going to die, die employed. A nice Jewish father. So I got a job fixing old Macintosh computers in the advertising industry. And that was how I had to rebuild my life from scratch. But I had the opportunity of a lifetime to get back behind the piano at certain points where I felt I had regained just enough to record. And I did. But it got really interesting. In January of 1997, at my 1-year follow-up, after we went in and they said, you're still really screwed up, but you're less screwed up. ABTA was happening to have, and I hate that expression, their conference at NYU. And we're leaving, and we saw the signage. Like, what the hell is this? There was no internet. There was nothing. The AOL chat rooms. How would we possibly know that this was a resource? So we walked in, said, do we have to register? And like this giant scar was my ticket in. And I wrote Naomi, the late, great, extraordinary, EGOT-winning advocate, Naomi Berkowitz, a letter after attending for about an hour. We had to go. I was just tired. I summarized this. Going back to the floppy, I found this letter in a DOS document on a floppy disk as I was moving an office to an office. The best pack rat hoarder strategy ever. And I thanked her. And she asked me to come play piano at the 1998 conference. And I did. And because it was 1998, there's no photo evidence. There's no proof I was there, but I was indeed there. And she sent me a thank you letter a few years later because once my CDs were produced, I sent them a few thousand copies to give away. This is the actual screenshot of a clip of a JPEG off a floppy disk. But it really happened, and when I was asked to come back this year, and I'm not going to do math, but whatever 2024 minus 1998 is, my God, it's good to be back. So that's the most important part of what I really wanted to share with you, is just the absolute, utter, karmic, serendipitous, synchronistic relevancy of standing before you. How I got to where I am today is a quicker story, and because I was kind of on the internet really early, I'm the only Matthew Zachary on Google. So you will have no problem getting in touch with me at any point in time. But what got me cancer famous was I was on an antiemetic, which back then wasn't even covered, and they didn't tell me about it. And the makers of that medication, I will not be mentioning names, got a copy of my albums and found out, because HIPAA didn't matter, that this poor kid that we told would never play again is playing again, and not throwing up 40 times a day has helped his quality of life. So they got me on television, and then I wound up being noticed by the American Cancer Society, and they invited me to give a piano concert on the Hill in front of the Capitol for 30,000 national advocates. That was a hell of a day. But that, if you trace the cord back to the right outlet, this is what set me on the path that I didn't know I could have. They call me the cancer-tainer. The media, I'll take it, I'll own it. And that's what the moniker was for quite a while. But it got me to meet this gentleman named Craig Lustig, who ticked like 8 boxes on the first day. You ready for this? Bald, 20-something, Jewish, from Brooklyn, brain cancer, went to Binghamton, was in my a cappella group and knew my uncle. We're still best friends. But Craig was on the board of directors of literally all these organizations. So that was the rabbit hole I jumped down, and I'm a disciple of Livestrong. The yellow wristband heyday, I was right there, and Craig asked me right then and there, how would you like to be a cancer advocate? And I said, what the hell is a cancer advocate? And he said, it means the next you won't get Robitussin for brain cancer. Sign me up. So I learned a lot about what advocacy meant to me in that little quip. But it turns out at that time, the young adult cancer universe barely existed. And I was a young adult. I had just turned 30. 9 years out. And there were all these jargony policy documents about what do we do with all the kids that live and all the people under 35 or 40 years old that don't have the access and the resources because they're only 6% of diagnoses. And I jumped on the ship and decided to start a nonprofit called Stupid Cancer, which at the time was rebellious and you couldn't say this and why is cancer stupid, and now you can say anything you want. But it got me the opportunity to have, this is what the website looked like. I don't know how I found this, but that's what it looked like. Netscape Navigator, anyone? And this was what my podcast was. But it wasn't called the podcast, it was called a live streaming talk radio download. Big words. It's my second bedroom. If MacGyver needed MacGyver, that's this room. But it set me on the path to have started the healthcare podcast revolution, hence why I loved when they called me the Podfather, even though it makes me sound like 90 years old. He's the Edison of podcasting. I've gone on to live an incredibly unordinary life. It's been equated to perhaps a less spectrumy Forrest Gump-like happenstance of being in the right place at the right time. And I've seen all sorts of amazing things happen, whether it's fertility rights, employer benefits, acknowledgement that we have mental health issues. That was a nice thing to not have in the 1990s. Oh, just walk it off. You look great. What's wrong with you? Get over it. Not having to pay $1 billion for every single drug. These are big ideas. ACA, flawed or not, was a young adult cancer forced to be reckoned with because we didn't want to live the rest of our lives with insurance baggage crap. So the takeaway here is that, are you listening to my show? I have a listener. Thank you. Subscriber number 2 next to my father. I started by saying that advocacy means different things to different people, and for me it's the no Robitussin for brain cancer. But what it means to us when you're drafted into the store you never wanted to shop inside of. We now all want to be the greeter that we wished we had. Everyone needs an Uncle Jay, and that's not always a reality. But through the lens of history, advocacy is truly a long game. And those documents, those Livestrong policies I showed you 2 years ago, it came out that everything we did worked. Through the lens of what advocacy meant in the 2000s, everything in that strategic plan happened and worked. Did it take 18 years? Should it have? But it worked. And now we have better problems to have. To me, advocacy means something a little different now. because I've been a public figure for quite a while. If you do advocacy right, no one needs to know that you exist. What was once 5% of young adults who were told about fertility access and rights and family planning at diagnosis 20 years ago is now 80%. Do those young men and women know that our movement helped make that right possible in, I think, 17 states now? No. They don't need to know who we are. We don't do that for that. So when you do things right, hopefully no one knows you did it. And that's the point. I do want to acknowledge, as we all are all too familiar with, that we don't all make it out the way we want. My brother-in-law, my grandfather, my aunt, my first cousin who was a rabbi that married us, countless people who've influenced me in my life, who came through stupid cancer. We do this because we have to do this. I didn't wake up and say, I'm going to Cancer University. I can't wait to get sick and listen to Matt's podcast. That guy. And of course, it's hard. It's hard to wake up every day and say, and not say why. Why am I here? Why is this happening? And I've come to recognize that it's less about why and more about where. Where do I go? What do I do? That's not where, but that's what. Super quick levity. Just a quick break of levity. I've worked in the industry for so long that it's just become too hard not to make fun of TV ads. How many people have ever told your doctor about something after watching an ad on the Super Bowl? Raise your hands. No one. No, that guy. My subscriber. He's done it. So, brain tumor patients are humans. I don't think we're portrayed as humans. Dealing with hearing loss and neuropathy, it doesn't require a shower. No one likes smiling people in pharma ads, dancing around in the wind. And of course, no one talks about the crippling costs. No one. Wait, I'll wait for everyone to get it. We got some slow folks in the back. We'll see. All right. Shameless plugs, obviously. I've been on the air for a very long time. My show is called Out of Patience. It's been a hiatus because I just got tired. It's coming back in November, and 2025 will be the 18th season, if you count it. I felt the need to tell the story of the people upon whose shoulders I stood, because now there are people standing on my shoulders. And this lens of history is so important because we don't know, put it this way, as much as advocacy means you don't know who did it for you, it's important to know it was done. Cancer Mavericks was a labor of love, 18 months in the making, an 8-part Spotify series from the 60s to the 2010s. Not about the medicines, not about the biology, not about the disease, but about the human beings who just, like in Network, they're mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. I encourage you all to have a listen to Cancer Mavericks. It's won 6 awards, been listened to nearly 1 million times. And it is the story of us. And the us is before us, and the us is before them. So my final thoughts, going back to that interesting letter that I wrote Naomi, treat the people, not the disease. We matter first. This is the young adult credo, is age first, biology second. And never tell anyone they can't do anything. Because they told me, by the way, I was Charlie Brown in summer camp, and I don't know why I picked this photo, but you have to know this. They said I'd never graduate. They said I'd never play. They said I'd never have kids. They said I'd never have a life. And who the hell would marry this train wreck? But you know what? My kids started high school yesterday. Kobe and Hannah, 14-year-old twins. And I promised everyone I'd not drop an F-bomb. But you know what I'm thinking in my head. I was just at CancerCon, which is the annual conference of stupid cancer that I started in 2008. And 350 people came to Austin, half of which were first-timers who were so happy to find this community. I had stepped down 5 years ago. The new CEO, Allison, who's the lady on top of the photo with my friend Kenny, she's done extraordinary things with the legacy. And no one knew who I was. I didn't go there for guts and glory. I went there knowing that advocacy matters. And I've never been more proud of the Americans who just take no shit. Good or bad, we are unordinary. No one asks for this. But we face an uphill battle through the wind. What, uphill both ways? Remember that? Going to school in the snow, uphill both ways. I want to thank Robitussin for sponsoring this episode of How Am I Alive? But I really do want to acknowledge ABTA, the leadership. I cannot tell you how humbling it is to stand before you. Math. 26 years later? Math? I did the math right. 26 years ago, I took the stage playing piano, not knowing if I'd be alive the next day. We never know if we're going to be alive the next day, but you take the day, and you own the day, and you thank the day. So I appreciate all of you for coming out, braving this. I don't like warriors. I don't like military terms. You're not fighters. We are human beings dealing with crap we didn't ask for, but we deal with it as one community. Thank you. That guy.
All right, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Matt. Honestly, that talk was fantastic. Can we get another round of applause for Matt? I mean, that was wonderful. You took us on a roller coaster. You know, you had us laughing, you had us crying.
I'm sorry, you are?
Just a regular old person. I stole the mic from someone down there and decided to come on up here and steal the show. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Umbreen. I am a program manager here at the ABTA. I work with the wonderful patient services team that helps put on this amazing conference year after year. And another reason I'm up here is because I also happen to be one of those people, like you said, who was drafted into the shopping store that nobody wants to shop at. I am a cancer survivor. I had cancer when I was 19, and I am now a little over a decade into my remission and my survivorship. And thank you. It's that cancer experience that really brought me to the work that I do today at the ABTA, and it's that cancer experience that gave me the pleasure of crossing paths with the amazing Matt Zachary. So you talked about the shoulders that we stand on. We're all here because we stood on somebody else's shoulders, and I'm gonna say I'm one of the people who's standing on your shoulders, Matt, because his mission, the work that you do, is what brought me where I am. I would not be here today. I wouldn't have the community and the support that I do if it wasn't for the incredible work that you've done for the adolescent and young adult cancer community. So let's get another round of applause for the difference that Matt has made.
There's a whole bunch of people that are like behind the pole, can't see Ariana Grande performing, so I'm gonna keep doing this and just reminding you that I'm here.
All right, well,
You
Matt,
also forgot the Easter egg.
what was the Easter egg?
You were in the CancerCon mosaic photo.
I was. Who spotted that? Did anybody notice that? Oh, someone noticed.
The subscriber guy. We're best friends, by the way.
Well, I would love to chat with you a little bit. So this is your homecoming, coming back to the ABTA after 26 years of not this exact stage, but a similar stage back in the day. Tell me a little bit about, back then, looking back where you're at now and where you were 26 years ago, and what the cancer and brain tumor space looked like back then and where we're at now. What are some changes that you've seen? What has been working? What's not working?
So there was a pilot episode of Cancer Mavericks, which is like bonus episode 9. My mother's a film historian, and she taught first grade for 40 years. And I brought her in to talk about pop culture and cancer across the 100 years of cinema. And she brought to my attention that nearly every character that died in any movie until like the 80s had a brain tumor. That's what sold audiences, a brain tumor. Whether there's Dark Victory or particular movie, it's always a brain tumor, the whisper stuff. And Mark Green and ER got a brain tumor, and you died of brain. The stigma of brain tumors was its own pop culture universe outside of leukemia, lymphoma, whatever else it was. Like, we lived in this upper echelon of, oh my God, than anything else. And that was what it really was. I have cancer. What kind? Brain. Ooh, right? I said, look, what's leukemia? Oh, it's blood cancer. You'll be fine. Brain cancer. Ooh, right? So that's kind of really what it was. And the absolute isolation we face in general is horrid. As an age relevancy, it's more horrid. But brain is like the redheaded stepchild of this space. There's a lot of genetic connections there. That's really what this was. I feel like we didn't come out as much. At Livestrong, it was mostly all breast and colon and blood cancers, and Craig was the only brain tumor survivor that I knew. We just weren't there. So it was a very different way to think about what does advocacy mean based on the type of cancer you have versus the age you're at. I'm glad that's changed, and people now have leukemia on television instead of brain cancer. It's a terrible thing, but again, you're laughing, but it's true. Go to every movie that has a cancer person. It's always leukemia or breast cancer now. So we've eliminated our stigma in Hollywood. Thank you, Hollywood. And I was going to say I forgot your question, but I just remembered it because I have a hole in my head that's filled with tinfoil after 29 years. The internet is a blessing and a curse. But the internet, when it works, is what helped us find each other and help destigmatize who we are to the others in the tribe.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. It's all about community, and I think that is something that really has changed. Even when I think about my own survivorship a little over 10 years ago, so much has changed into making support more accessible and making it easier for us to do exactly what we're doing here at this conference, connecting with other people who really understand and truly get what you're going through. So I want to go back to advocacy again, because that's obviously something that you do an amazing job at. And you took that wrench that was thrown into your life. You took that wrench and you used it to build something, and you built something absolutely incredible. Can you share some advice with everyone that's sitting here today on, how can they get there? How can they get to that point where they can own that wrench that was thrown into their life and move forward from there?
I think the hardest lesson I learned as a nonprofit leader is that you have to accept you can't help everyone. You help the ones you can. Because it can get a little dopamine hitty sometimes where you just want to do more and more and more. And there are limits to who you can help and how many people you can help. And that was the hardest part, is something like 80,000 AYAs are diagnosed every year, and Stupid Kids are only help 3,000 of them. Like, how do we get more? How is this possible? What do we do? And we realized that's still 3,000 people. That's 3,000 people. So my first advice is, if you're thinking of getting to nonprofits, don't. If you're already there, my condolences. But if your legacy, thank you for doing that. Picking what matters most to you comes down to how you want to help the people you can. I once gave a piano concert for one person. In a snowstorm in New York, there was an event for the cancer support community. Not the blizzard of 1996. And I came and they had upright piano, and there was supposed to like 20 or 30 people that came, and one person came in the snowstorm. And I gave her a concert for one. And one might say, I'm a concert piano, I 30,000, one person. I helped one person. And that was enough for that moment. So that's the one big takeaway is if you're thinking of this, or if you're in it, the dopamine can be just as horrible as a Twix bar. Don't eat Twix bars. Not a sponsor. Recognize that you can help the ones you can, and do it how you think is best for you.
I love that. I love that you're focusing so much on just the one. It doesn't matter about the masses that you might be able to impact. If you can impact just one life, that's what matters to that one person, because that's their entire world. So, you talked a lot about how you've had to advocate for yourself as a patient, and you were so lucky that you had Uncle Jay with you to help advocate for you and get you what you needed. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I'm sure there's a lot of patients here who they're thinking about their quality of life as they're going through their treatments and figuring out, will I still be able to go to school or work the same way or take care of my kids the same way? How can they, what are some ways that they can advocate for their quality of life, what's important for them while they're also treating the tumor and going through this disease?
Yeah, there's so many parts to that. 1111, make a wish, sorry. There's a lot of parts to that to deconstruct. The first of which is, not everyone's born with what I call congenital chutzpah. You understand what that means? Like embedded moxie, right? Like, you're just not. Some of you are, which is great. So it's one thing to know to stand up for yourself, like when you go to Kroger's, you have Kroger's out here, right? Right? I mean, I heard you have a thing called Kroger's out here. We have Walbams. And if there's a mistake on the receipt, you yell. You go back, you complain. I got charged too much for orange juice, whatever it was. We don't do that in healthcare because we don't know we can do that in healthcare. So the first layer is deal with what you have urgently. And I think it's almost too easy to say, just be your own advocate. We don't go to advocate school to then get cancer 4 years later. So in a perfect world, you'll have someone with you, friend, caregiver, family member, spouse, sibling, partner, whatever it is. And in an area where you don't, it's like going to Google. You have to hope that there is something there. It's just a stark reality. I don't paint rosy pictures. But being able to have the gumption to ask why this, why that, is the single most important asset any human can have in any situation. But when you're terrified, and I was listening to the panel before, you're not being understood. There is no emotional intelligence in a conversation. How do you break that barrier? How do you stand up for yourself that we're like, oh, it's all in your head, get over it, right? This still happens today. But the layer above that is dealing with costs and your hospital and your insurance company and your employer benefits. Like, that's a whole other level of nightmare telephone wire craziness. I will share one quick story because it never ends. It never ends. But as you learn to play the game, as you learn the ropes, I now know that when my insurance company switched, and I won't name names, but it rhymes with Earmark. They're not a sponsor. Trust me. And I was on a formulary for GERD because my duodenum doesn't work after all those years as a fun side effect. And I've been on the formulary since 2009 when it was FDA approved. I never went on to generic because there weren't any. I switched to this new insurance and they said, nope, you don't need this. Go on, tier 9. So I had to buy from Canada. And I'm lucky I knew a guy in Canada that could sell it to me. But it took me a year for me to get it approved with formulary exemptions and prior authorizations and external reviews. And I actually found out every state has a pharmacist association that you can call, and they're like Harvey Keitel in Pulp Fiction. They come clean up the brains. I made a call to one person that I was introduced to by another person, and the next day it was approved. Can you imagine everyone knowing that they can call their pharmacists, their state-based pharmacist advocates? So no one knows that exists. Now I do, and now you do. You make a call, you tell them I've gone through all this crap, and they say you're doing this. It's like getting shamed on the news. So it never ends. There's always different layers and versions and nonsense. So that's a ridiculously long answer that may not have actually answered your question, but it is my hope that enough people have the gumption to demand why, to ask why, and to challenge. I don't throw doctors under the bus. The overwhelming majority are following Hippocrates. That's their job, to be mechanics or empaths. They'd rather have mechanics. If they have empaths, that's a nice bonus to have. But it is our job to be our own greeter in the store we never wanted to shop inside of. Because they're going to tell you what you need is on aisle 7, and someone else is going to pay for it, but you owe this much. Versus, I just want to get in the Camry and have a drive.
Yeah. You know, I love that you talked about the gumption that you have to have. And I'm curious to know how many of you guys in the audience are introverts? Do we have any introverts? Okay, I'm an introvert too. I'm a huge introvert. I'm so much so an introvert that in grade school, I was too shy to ask the teacher if I could get up and go to the bathroom, so I would literally hold it until I got home. And why am I telling this story about me and my bladder? Because having gumption, it's tough. You do. As a patient, you have to have the guts to speak up to yourself, for yourself. And when you're going through something like this, it's so hard because you have this doctor who, they seem like they're on a pedestal, so smart and educated as they are, and it can feel so intimidating to speak up for yourself. But, like you kind of alluded to, you are the expert of yourself. You know yourself better than anybody else, and that's why it's so important to advocate for yourself and speak up for yourself. But I do think it's important what you said, that what does it mean to be your own advocate? We throw that around, but we don't really understand what that means. And what are some resources that you can share just to help people better understand, how do I do that? How do I get to that point where I can have that gumption to talk to my doctor about what I'm going through and explain what I need for myself?
Not Google. A quick sidebar. In my world of jargony crap, we use the term social determinants of health. Someone made that up. There's a business card somewhere. All it means is the luck of the Irish. Where you're born, what you have, what your upbringing was, determines your life. But that's nature nurture. What we don't talk about is how do we find things we didn't know we needed. You want a fridge? You shop for a fridge. You want to learn about trial? Don't go to Google. Google is the worst enemy of access to things you didn't know you needed. I look at the internet, again, through this floppy disk lens, and it's great to find communities because it turns out, and this is real data, there's a great book you can read called Rebel Health by my dear friend Susanna Fox, who was Chief Information Officer of Medicare. Dear friend. Rebel Health. Turns out that peer-to-peer decision-making improves outcomes 40% more than Google search. Finding a community, which is not that hard anymore. Thankfully, that's a good part of the internet. You find the nonprofits. The people you meet there, whether you're shy or not, it's the club you didn't want to join, come in, the water's fine. We're sorry you're here. But that, to me, is a way better opportunity of getting the right information, medical or non-medical, than the internet.
I love that. And I'm going to put a plug for our peer mentorship program. The ABTA does have a wonderful program where you can connect with a mentor, a peer, exactly like what you were saying, talking to somebody that's actually been there and can share their experiences and what they've learned from walking in your shoes. So definitely check it out. Talk to some of our mentors who are here today and learn more about that.
Nice plug.
Thank you. Had to do that. So I know we have a couple minutes left. I want to know, we talked about the past, talked about the history. What's next? What do you envision happening next in terms of patient advocacy? What more can we do moving forward?
So Cancer Mavericks talked about how there have only really been 4 major voter revolutions in this country for healthcare reform. The first was the National Cancer Act of 1971. The second one combined the Orphan Drug Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Cancer Rehabilitation Act in the 1980s. The third was the breast cancer and HIV wars in the 90s. And the last was the young adult cancer revolution that led to ACA. We're overdue for voters to know what to do. There are enough people in this country screwed by healthcare who don't know how to vote for the right ballots in the right states. And the revolution, and that could be a weird word these days, is down ballot, state-based policy changes on Medicare reform, pricing, employer benefits, reimbursements, access to care, rural health, and mental health. We are in a space now where this could not be a conversation 10 years ago. And the aspiration I have for the next 5 years is to be the voice of the American voter with my hundreds of colleagues that are doing all the groundwork and the ant farms of policy to make the changes that won't happen unless we do it. And that's the future of advocacy in American healthcare.
That's great, thank you. We've seen how much has changed in those 26 years since you've been with ABTA and the National Conference, and I can't wait to see all of the change that is to come. Our motto is meet hope head on, and we can do that when we work together, when we advocate, when we do exactly what you said. We use our voices to make the change that we need to see. Thank you so much, Matt. It has been such an honor to get to sit with you at your homecoming at the ABTA and chat with you. And I hope that all of you guys took something away from Matt's experience, everything that he's accomplished, and what he's had to share with you. Thank you so much. Can we get another round of applause for Matt?